The moment their lips touched, electricity surged through her body. What had started as a silly dare among friends had suddenly become the most pivotal moment of Eliza's life. But as she pulled away from the kiss, the serious-faced stranger's expression darkened. "Do you always kiss men you don't know, or am I special?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Little did she know, James Blackwood wasn't just any single dad at the bar. He controlled half the city's power grid and had the influence to change her life forever. And after tonight, he intended to do exactly that. Eliza Matthews never backed down from a challenge. That's what had gotten her through design school, launched her struggling business, and brought her to this upscale bar on a Friday night when she should have been home working on client proposals. Her friends had spotted him immediately, the impossibly handsome man sitting alone, his expression severe as he nursed a whiskey, checking his watch periodically as if whoever he was waiting for was late. "I dare you to kiss him," Megan had whispered, giggling into her cocktail. $20 says you won't. 50 says I will, Eliza had responded, already standing up and smoothing down her dress. She needed that $50 more than she cared to admit. The rent on her tiny studio apartment was due, and her last client had delayed payment yet again. Walking across the bar had felt like crossing an ocean. Each step brought her closer to the stranger with the intense eyes and the set jaw. He was undeniably attractive, broad shoulders filling out an expensive suit, dark hair with just a touch of silver at the temples. But it was the way he held himself, completely self-contained and radiating authority, that made her heart race. Eliza tucked a strand of her long, silky white blonde hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. Now, as she stood before him after that impulsive kiss, watching his expression shift from surprise to something darker, she realized she might have made a terrible mistake. Her perfect figure, usually an asset in getting what she wanted, suddenly felt like a liability under his scrutinizing gaze. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her cheeks burning. "My friends dared me, and I." "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. It wasn't a request. His voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone used to being obeyed without question. Eliza sat, her legs suddenly weak. "I really am sorry. That was completely inappropriate." Yes, it was. His eyes, a startling shade of blue that reminded her of Arctic ice, studied her face. "I'm James. And you are?" "Eliza. Eliza Matthews." "Well, Eliza Matthews, you've certainly made my evening more interesting." A hint of a smile touched his lips, transforming his severe features into something devastatingly handsome. "I was supposed to meet a business associate who's clearly stood me up. Perhaps this is a better use of my time." What happened next would change both their lives forever. But neither of them could have predicted the storms they would weather together, or how that impulsive kiss would lead them through heartbreak, healing, and ultimately, to love. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and let me know in the comments if you've ever done something impulsive that changed your life. James ordered her a drink, the same whiskey he was having, and Eliza tried not to wince as it burned down her throat. She could see her friends at their table, wide-eyed and giggling, making exaggerated gestures for her to come back. Megan, always the instigator, was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. "Your friends seem concerned," James observed, following her gaze. His fingers tapped a precise rhythm on the table, betraying a restlessness that his composed face didn't show. "They're just surprised I actually did it. The dare, I mean." Eliza fidgeted with the silver bracelet on her wrist, a nervous habit she'd developed in childhood. "And do you always do what you're dared to do?" There was something in his voice, curiosity, perhaps, or challenge. His eyes never left her face, as if cataloging every expression, every micro-reaction. "Only when I need the money," she admitted, then immediately regretted her honesty. Growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs had taught her to never show financial vulnerability. His eyebrow arched. "They're paying you? $50. Pathetic, right?" But when you're trying to get a design business off the ground in this economy, every bit helps. She tried to sound casual, but the strain of the past few months, maxed out credit cards, ramen dinners, sleepless nights worrying about bills, weighed on her words. James leaned forward, his interest visibly piqued. What kind of design? Interior design. I specialize in sustainable, eco-friendly spaces. She took another sip of whiskey, finding it easier to swallow this time. What about you? What do you do when you're not being accosted by strange women in bars? A shadow crossed his face, and for a moment, something vulnerable flickered in his eyes before disappearing behind a wall of practiced control. I run Blackwood Energy. We manage a significant portion of the city's power infrastructure. Eliza nearly choked on her drink. Blackwood Energy was one of the largest companies in the region. Which meant the man she had impulsively kissed was James Blackwood, the notoriously private CEO who rarely appeared in public except for the occasional charity event. The man whose face had been on the cover of Business Weekly just last month, labeled the power broker with a heart of ice. You're that James Blackwood, she whispered, suddenly feeling very small in her second-hand designer dress. Is there another one I should know about? The corner of his mouth twitched, revealing a dimple she hadn't noticed before. It softened his face, making him look younger, more approachable. I just kissed a power mogul on a $50 dare. My life has officially become absurd. She laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. Her mother would have a fit if she knew. Diane Matthews had raised her daughter to be practical, sensible, and above all, cautious. Power man, he corrected, his eyes crinkling slightly. That's what my son calls me. He's 7 and thinks I control electricity like a superhero. For the first time, genuine warmth entered his voice, and Eliza caught a glimpse of the man behind the powerful CEO facade. The mention of his son softened something in Eliza's chest. You have a son? Noah. He's the reason I don't usually accept kisses from strangers in bars. James's expression grew serious again, a familiar sadness settling over his features. His mother died when he was 3. It's been just the two of us since then. The vulnerability in that simple statement struck Eliza deeply. She thought of her own father, who had walked out when she was 5, never to return. I'm sorry about your wife. Ex-wife, he clarified, twisting the heavy platinum watch on his wrist. We were already separated when she got sick. Cancer. It happened very quickly. His words were clipped, precise, but Eliza sensed oceans of unspoken grief beneath them. Eliza nodded, unsure what to say. The playful dare had suddenly veered into unexpectedly personal territory. She twisted a strand of her hair around her finger, a habit her mother had tried and failed to break. And now I've made things awkward, James said, draining his glass. Not exactly how I planned to spend my evening. He signaled the bartender for another round, his movements economical and confident. How did you plan to spend it? Eliza asked, genuinely curious about this complex man who seemed to carry both immense power and profound sadness. Discussing a potential partnership that would have expanded our renewable energy division. But as I said, my associate didn't show. A flash of irritation crossed his face. James Blackwood was clearly not a man accustomed to being kept waiting. Eliza leaned forward, her interest genuine. Renewable energy? That's actually something I'm passionate about. My designs incorporate solar panels, passive heating and cooling, anything to reduce the carbon footprint. Her eyes lit up as she spoke, her hands gesturing animatedly. This was the one topic that could always break through her carefully maintained composure. For the first time, James looked at her with real interest rather than polite curiosity. Is that right? Perhaps this evening won't be a complete waste after all. He leaned back, studying her with new appreciation. Tell me more about your approach to sustainable design. What began as a conversation about sustainable energy soon expanded into a wide-ranging discussion about their work, their lives, their dreams. Hours passed unnoticed. Eliza's friends eventually left, Megan dropping the promised $50 on the table with a wink and a thumbs up. James ordered food when they realized they were hungry, and more drinks when those were gone. Eliza found herself revealing things she rarely shared, how her mother had worked multiple jobs to put her through design school, how she'd turned down a lucrative offer from a major firm because they wanted her to compromise on sustainability, how sometimes she wondered if she'd made the right choice when she looked at her empty bank account. James, in turn, spoke of the pressure of running a company that thousands of people depended on, the challenge of balancing work with raising a son alone, and his vision for transforming Blackwood Energy into a leader in renewable resources despite resistance from the old guard on his board. "They think green energy is a fad," he said, his frustration evident in the tightening of his jaw. "They can't see that it's the future, the only future if we want to leave a habitable planet for our children." "For Noah," Eliza said softly. "Yes." James's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, understanding, connection, recognition of a kindred spirit. "For Noah." It was nearly midnight when James checked his watch and sighed. "I should get home. My son." "Of course," Eliza said quickly. "The babysitter." "My mother, actually. She lives with us, helps with Noah. But she'll be wondering where I am." He ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up its perfect styling in a way that made him look more human, more accessible. As they stood to leave, an awkward silence fell between them. The easy conversation of the past few hours suddenly evaporated, leaving uncertainty in its wake. Eliza gathered her purse, suddenly conscious of the worn leather and fraying strap. "I had a nice time," Eliza finally said, tucking her hair behind her ear. Despite the unorthodox beginning. James smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face, revealing the man he might have been in another life, one with fewer responsibilities and burdens. "So did I. In fact." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket for his business card. "I'd like to continue our conversation about sustainable design. My company is renovating our headquarters, and we want it to be a showcase for green technology." Eliza's heart raced as she took the card, her fingers brushing against his. The contact sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with business opportunities. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Blackwood?" "I'm offering you an opportunity to pitch your ideas. The job would depend on whether they're as good as you claim." His tone was professional, but his eyes held something warmer, more personal. "They're better," she said with confidence she didn't entirely feel. Years of being underestimated had taught her to project certainty even when doubt gnawed at her insides. James laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I look forward to being impressed, then." He hesitated again, then added, "And perhaps we could discuss them over dinner? Tomorrow night?" Before Eliza could answer, a commotion at the bar's entrance caught their attention. A woman was arguing loudly with the bouncer, her voice slurred but insistent. She was expensively dressed, her blonde hair styled in a perfect bob, but her makeup was smudged and her movements unsteady. "I'm telling you, he's expecting me. James Blackwood. Ask him yourself." James's expression hardened instantly, the warmth vanishing from his eyes. "Rebecca," he muttered, his body tensing like a soldier preparing for battle. "Who is she?" Eliza asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. "My business associate. The one who stood me up." His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "And Noah's aunt. My late ex-wife's sister. She's been trying to get custody of him since Caroline died, claiming I'm an unfit father because I work too much." As if sensing their attention, Rebecca spotted them and pushed past the bouncer. "James. There you are. And who's this? Your latest distraction from parenting responsibilities?" Her words were slurred, but the venom in them was unmistakable. The venom in her voice made Eliza flinch. James stepped slightly in front of her, his posture protective. The gesture wasn't lost on Eliza. This man she barely knew was already shielding her from conflict. "Rebecca, you're drunk. Let me call you a cab." His voice was controlled, but Eliza could sense the tension coiled within him, like a spring wound too tight. "Don't patronize me." Rebecca spat, her perfectly manicured finger jabbing the air between them. "I came here to discuss Noah's future, and I find you cozying up to some floozy." "That's enough," James said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We're leaving. We can discuss Noah when you're sober." But Rebecca wasn't finished. She turned her attention to Eliza, eyes narrowed with malice. "Do you know what kind of man you're getting involved with? He worked my sister to death with his demands and neglect. And now he's doing the same to my nephew. If you're feeling the tension building, drop a heart in the comments. This family drama is about to get even more complicated." Eliza felt James tense beside her, saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. But before he could respond, she stepped forward, drawing on the strength she developed growing up with a mother who taught her to stand her ground. "I don't know you," she said calmly, meeting Rebecca's bloodshot eyes, "and you certainly don't know me. But I've spent the evening talking with James, and I can tell he's a devoted father who puts his son first. Whatever issues you have with him, this isn't the place to air them." Rebecca blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. "And who exactly are you?" She looked Eliza up and down, taking in her second-hand dress and simple jewelry with obvious disdain. "Someone who doesn't appreciate seeing a good man slandered in public." Eliza turned to James, whose expression was a mixture of surprise and something that might have been admiration. "I should go. Call me about that project when you've handled this." She walked away quickly, heart pounding. Behind her, she could hear Rebecca's continued accusations and James's measured responses. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed skin. She took a deep breath, trying to process everything that had happened. A simple dare had led to meeting one of the most intriguing men she'd ever encountered, a man with complications, responsibilities, and apparently, enemies. The sensible thing would be to tear up his business card and forget the entire evening. That's what her mother would advise: stay in your lane, Eliza. Men like that bring nothing but trouble. Instead, she carefully tucked it into her purse and hailed a taxi home, her mind replaying the feeling of his lips against hers, the warmth in his eyes when he spoke of his son, the protective way he'd stepped in front of her when Rebecca appeared. The next morning, Eliza woke to a text from an unknown number: "Dinner tonight? I promise no dramatic interruptions. James." She stared at her phone, conflicted. The man was clearly dealing with serious family issues. Getting involved, personally or professionally, could be messy. But something about him, his quiet strength, his obvious love for his son, the way his eyes had lit up when they discussed sustainable energy, had gotten under her skin. Before she could overthink it, she texted back, "I'd like that. Send me the details." Her mother's voice echoed in her head, "Think before you leap, Eliza," but for once, she ignored it. James's response came immediately, "I will." "And Eliza? Thank you for what you said last night. It meant more than you know." That evening found her at an intimate restaurant overlooking the city. James was already seated when she arrived, standing as she approached the table. He wore a different suit than the night before, equally expensive but less formal, and his hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his eyes taking in her emerald green dress, another thrift store find that she'd altered herself to fit her curves perfectly. Eliza smoothed down her dress, suddenly self-conscious. "Thank you. This place is lovely." The restaurant was clearly exclusive, with panoramic windows offering a stunning view of the city lights below. "It's one of the few restaurants where I can have a private conversation without worrying about being overheard." He held her. "It's one of the few restaurants where I can have a private conversation without worrying about being overheard." He held her chair as she sat. I owe you an explanation about last night. You don't owe me anything, Eliza said, tucking a strand of silky hair behind her ear. We barely know each other. That's technically true, but after you defended me to Rebecca, I feel you deserve the truth. James's blue eyes were serious, his fingers absently turning the stem of his water glass. My ex-wife, Caroline, and I had a complicated relationship. We married young, when I was still building my company. I worked long hours, and she resented it. By the time Noah was born, we were already living separate lives. He paused as the waiter brought wine, waiting until they were alone again before continuing. The dim lighting cast shadows across his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw. When Noah was 2, Caroline asked for a divorce. I didn't fight it, we were both unhappy. We agreed to share custody. But a year later, she was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. His voice grew tight, and his knuckles whitened around his glass. She moved back in so I could help care for her and Noah. She died 6 months later. I'm so sorry, Eliza said softly, resisting the urge to reach across the table and take his hand. Rebecca blames me for Caroline's unhappiness. She believes the stress of our marriage contributed to her illness. And now she's convinced I'm neglecting Noah the same way she thinks I neglected her sister. His voice held a bitterness that seemed to have been building for years. Are you? Neglecting him, I mean. Eliza's directness surprised even herself. James looked startled by the question, his practiced composure slipping for a moment. I don't think so. I've restructured my entire life around him. I work from home 3 days a week. I'm there for breakfast every morning and dinner every night. I coach his soccer team on weekends. A shadow crossed his face, and he ran a hand through his dark hair. But I still run a major company. There are times when work has to take priority. That's true for any working parent, Eliza pointed out, thinking of her own mother who had missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences because she couldn't afford to lose a shift. Yes, but most working parents don't have vindictive in-laws with E.